I'd like to shoot a video today a little bit more on my current trend of getting our cars to steer better. I have some aero tips, I got some other thoughts I'd like to roll past the group, so let's roll the intro and let's talk a little bit about getting our cars to steer better.
I've spent the last 30 plus years working on race cars, building race cars, and racing cars. And I'm here to help you better understand racing technology.
Catch any of the new viewers up on kind of what I've been driving at lately. I've been suggesting chassis changes and ideas to make our cars steer better. I think the main problem with us and the way we have our cars now is they are so aero-tight. If you lose air on the front of the nose, the car doesn't steer anymore. And I think we need to keep that balance in the car so we are not as important on aero. Aero will always be a big part of our sport now, but if we can make it so the balance, so if we are 90% dependent on aero on our nose to steer the car, can we narrow that percentage? Can we get it down to we are only 60% dependent on aero to steer the car and our front geometry and our left front tires on the ground, and everything there is helping to steer the car instead of just aero. I see the left front corners coming up and bobbing on these cars, so I know when that happens, or it's when the left front at least gets very light because we're chaining them up. The problem then also becomes that we are even more dependent on aero to steer the cars. So all the changes, and you can see them in videos that I've shot recently on how important I think it is to get our cars to steer better with the front tires. Another aspect of it is the way we've been running cars now, and this is going to take, I guess, we're going to see where this comes to head. Right now we are in a slide job culture. I mean, Bobby Pierce has been winning with the sliders, the big sliders, for years, and now it's kind of ingrained ourselves into our sport with other drivers that never used to drive like that, but because Bobby's been so predominantly successful with it, everybody's kind of filing suit, and we are becoming a car culture of slide jobs. And basically, if a guy slides up the track now, if he misses and you don't give away on him, you're the bad guy. And that mindset and culture is going to have to change. If a guy slides you and you don't lift and you wreck him, I mean, that's going to have to be part of our acceptance of the culture that you slid, you missed, shame on you. And right now it's not. If a guy slides you and he misses, it's shame on you for not lifting and letting him in. So it's kind of a mindset around the culture. Our cars are too tight, we can't turn, which makes exciting racing, don't get me wrong. I mean, the sanctioning bodies, other fans, and everything probably loves this stuff because it is exciting watching the top three or top four slide each other twice in a lap for the lead. I mean, it's thrilling, but if we're talking about a car balance culture, I came into late models through sprint car racing because I love the aspect of the cars being balanced and trying to find traction with different aspects of the rear suspension and keeping that car balanced. That's why I came in from sprint car racing. I got so tired of the slide job, just those cars are way too tight when you put a wing on them. So it's just become a slide job culture. You get in there and you run it hard and you wreck the guy in front of you. Oops, I'm sorry. So I got away from sprint cars and got into late models to get away from the slide job culture and get more towards a driving culture. Now we have a late model culture that's a slide job culture, and it's just, I just don't know what to make of it. I like some of the racing, but I think it's getting a little too far. One aspect I'd like to touch on is how tight the rear of our cars have gotten. There was a years ago when we all used to run our spoilers at varying degrees for how tight or how much traction we wanted. And then it was one year we went to Florida and all the top teams had their spoilers stood up 90 degrees. And we're like, okay, it makes sense. Most traction, most downforce, not really thinking about the drag too much. But that's when we weren't letting our cars jack up like we were now. Now, years later, now we're letting our cars go. We got a droop height and we're jacking our cars way up in the air. Our spoilers are at 90. And it's almost thinking that we may be getting our cars too aero tight in the back. Maybe we should be taking more and more rear percentage out of it as, you know, as the night goes on, or if you're gonna run through the slick and you wanna keep that car balanced to turn around the bottom, maybe taking a little air out of the back with spoiler or something, or taking rear percentage out. You know, we might be getting down to a point on to get your car balanced with all the aero we get in the back, getting down to like a 51%. More along the lines of thinking of how the pavement guys do it. Their rear percentages normally aren't nearly what ours are to get the traction. Get more of a balance into it rather than just an aero downforce, and try to kind of balance that between static rear and aero rear. I think there's a lot of learning to do on that. We do have late models that have gone into wind tunnels, but we don't do wind tunnel testing with these cars enough to, I guess, make decisions. We got some aero data from different teams that have done this, but aero testing in wind tunnel is so expensive. We really are on the hit and miss and the shoot and kind of working with aero with what we know, rather than going to take a concept and test it in a tunnel, because most teams just can't afford something like that. Now I'd like to touch on a couple of maybe aero topics. I've done so much with the suspension lately. I think maybe I should run across a couple of aero ideas I've had lately and put them out there to the group and see where they're at on it and kind of get some feedback and ideas. This is what I think about some of the aero. A couple weeks ago, Devin Moran showed up at Volusia with like a large gap on his right front fender where they're really sticking that out there. which helps with aero. It helps draw the air out from underneath the nose and puts downforce on the nose. I remember years ago when Davenport was first getting fast, he was tucking his right front in, and it's almost like his right front tire was touching his bat wing or his front fender there almost. You know, it was in further, maybe the body was shifted right a little bit, not really sure. But now we're showing up, which makes more sense to me, of big gaps in that between that right front fender and that right front nose flare there. That makes a ton of sense. But now we're getting to a point, and I brought this up in the past, is they came up with that rule, that diagonal rule across the back spoiler so far forward, and then a diagonal. And I came up with a cheat on that where if you take that whole, I guess, center section of the car and maintain those dimensions, if you just shifted that whole center of the car over, that would give you the same yaw as what they were doing. They used to just taper the right sides and get that deal yaw into there, but then they came up with that rule. So now I think that turning that whole rear end of the car is probably the way to go. But now let's take it one step further. Could we almost be turning that right front and pushing that right front back on our bumpers and then pulling our left front forward so the angle of our front nose is actually pointed in the yaw position to the rest of the track? We're always going to run at some yaw because of rear steer. Whether it's 10, I used to use the yaw of about 18 degrees as a thinking there. So somewhere between maybe 10 and 18 degrees, 15 degrees, somewhere in there. But if you turn that nose, and that nose actually, instead of running up and is actually kind of not in sync with the yaw, you're actually running that nose now directly into the wind. So anything coming off the left side of that car actually ends up on the left side of the car. Before, when you run into the yaw position, you're like that whole left side gets shrouded. So I would absolutely go for the fact that we need to open up those left side wheel wells, since the left side is essentially becoming the back of the car now. I think our left rear wheel wells are getting too small, and I think our left fronts could be addressed as well. Open those things up. That's the back of your car. It's like putting a parachute on the back of your car. You don't want to do that. You want to open up those left rear wheel wells, especially when you have to do a green flag pit stop or something. Getting that left rear tire on and off is a nightmare, and it doesn't have to be. Maybe a big left rear wheel well or a big left front isn't as sexy, but I'm pretty sure it will be faster in the long run. I don't go for the sexy part, I go for the speed. I have some drawings on this I'm going to show later on to kind of illustrate it. I went in and made some drawings last night, and I think that will better help illustrate what I'm all talking about here. But another change I'd like everybody to kind of consider is raising the left side of the nose up. Now, maybe that would be elongating. They have a rule where they put a line across their straight edge, and you can only be so far from one fender to the other fender and drop at the highest point. I don't know. They got too many rules now. But it almost seems like if you can still make that rule that they kind of judge you by, but then you raise your entire left front of the bumper of the entire nose piece up to put that thing so if this is the left front, it is actually higher and that whole thing is actually like a mountain. So when you roll that whole front over, that left front actually puts pressure down on that left front. Then you have the big left front wheel well there that's sucking air out from underneath the car, and then you have more air on top, which would probably help the fact of when you get in traffic, you're taking the aero spread out of it, where you might be able to run up underneath a guy and take the aero off the right front a little bit because your right front has ton of traction, and put more aero on your left front just to kind of balance that whole thing out there. You know, when you run up underneath somebody and you can stick that right front nose in there, but that left front is there just pushing down, that might be an advantage. And putting that whole left front up and tilting that whole bar down towards the right front might be a way to get there. It's an idea. It might not be real popular with everybody. I'm just throwing some stuff out there to see what people think, kinda. And this is where I'm thinking from right now. So let's go over to the drawing board and do some drawings, and I'll show you what I actually mean visibly so you can get kind of a better idea. Okay, this is an image of the car the way they want to see it. They have their back to front dimension, they have their side to side, and they have their X dimension. That's all has to jive. The car is square and it looks kind of like it. This is a bad drawing, but it looks like a general representation of a square car. Now, to get around the rule, this is what now this is an exaggeration, but this is what I was talking. We maintain the entire center of the car, so all your dimensions here all still jive with what they want. You turn this whole center of the car to get the yaw angle to line up on the right side. Now, I brought this up before. I think this might be what Devin Moran's doing. I never looked at his car. I saw some pictures online of people talking about it, but this may be what he is doing to get that big front fender to stick way out there. Like, it's just turning the entire basic structure of the car. Now this is kind of what I envision for a car moving forward, and kind of the ideas. We always used to taper our left rears when we put the crease in the door. That was a thing when I came into the sport. Now we're all going with that single non-crease door on the left side. But putting a crease from the top spoiler hinge down to the middle of the tire will flare that out and actually create like a funnel out of the car. If we were to open up the left rear wheel well in the left front, it would almost be like creating funnels to push air out from underneath the car. That's what I'm kind of talking about here. The next thing I'd like to see, and still has a turned center here. The next thing I really like is turning that nose into the yaw of the car. Instead of having it square, we just turn that right front back a little bit. You know, a couple degrees, 2, 3, can start out subtly until they catch it, or if they don't catch it, keep cranking it till you get kind of your yaw point, because then that also opens up that left side. It pushes this directly into the wind and creates funnels coming outside and pulling air out from underneath the car. I think I'd like to see some results or something like that. See some people try it or experiment, because I think this could be the way to go. I think Rayburn was doing this years ago, years and years ago, where he'd turn that right front bumper in a little bit to get that nose to kind of catch the air squarer. And this is the other thing that I was kind of proposing here. This is our cars now. Front end is raised up for ground clearance, car rolls over. This is pretty much level, and then we have our big gap here that they put a straight edge in on the measure on this here for the bump on the left front corner. But this is kind of where we are. This is the right front over here, and as far as how the thing leans. But now this is kind of what I've been thinking of lately, and I'd like to see what other people think about it, is actually raising this, I call it the hood bar here, raising this hood bar up and raising that whole left side up so you get more frontal area over here, and this becomes more of an aerodynamic area, especially when you turn that whole right front nose back, making that right front more aero on the outside and shoot air and keep air out from underneath the car, I think will help our steer on the right front. Then raising this bar up and creating a bigger frontal area over here, because we're always going to have the taper here because of the nose drop. But creating a bigger left front aero deal here and raising this up so you get more downforce, so when that car rolls over, that left front is just like a big billboard taking the tightness out of our car. Because when you run up underneath somebody and this right side is kind of shrouded, you still have the left side to play with. So put as much force in that left side, keep that left front tire on the ground, and I think we're going to take that percentage of being aero dependent on the front from 90% maybe down into a workable 50 or 60% aero dependent. So then you won't have as much problem running up underneath the guys, and I think the racing might actually get a little better. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. It really helps me out and really keeps me motivated to doing these videos. So subscribe, hit the like button, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.